So today I have on the show the illustrious Barry Eisler, writer of the John Rain series and a couple of other series as well, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
John Rain, Livia Lone, Ben Trevin, Daniel Larison, Marvin Manis, a
very
whole bunch
very
of different
prolific.
series.
John Rain's the one I'm the most familiar with.
Yeah,
So I was wanting to ask, and I know a lot of people ask about how'd you get started or whatnot, but what I wanted to ask is what was the first story, be it a book, a film, maybe even a game that was like, I want to do that. I This is what I want to get into.
that's a good question. I was a big reader when I was a kid. My favorite novels tended to be horror novels. Stephen King was
Nice.
an early favorite and certainly an early influence, but I didn't really realize that I wanted to be a novelist until relatively late in life. I was always good at writing. I always liked to play around with short stories when I was a kid. At every job I've ever had, I wound up becoming known as the guy who could write a thing if you needed it, marketing copy, a business plan, whatever it was you needed, some kind of strategic communication. And so it's weird when I look back to think I really liked writing and I had a knack for it. Why did it take me until I was about 30 to put together these two very obvious realizations into a bigger realization, which is, well, maybe you could make a living writing. Have you ever thought about that instead of being a lawyer or any of the other things you've ever done? But it did actually take me until I was about 30 to put together those realizations. And what caused it for anyone who's listening, or you're wondering, where do stories come from? How do I write? How do I feed my imagination? All that kind of stuff. It wasn't deliberate at the time, but when I look back, I think I see what was going on, and it's this. I, since I was a kid, I've had a lot of eclectic interests, including some that I sometimes loosely refer to as forbidden knowledge, which I think of as information, right? Information that the government wants to be in the hands and the heads of only a select few individuals. We could be talking about lock picking or poisons or disguise or escape and evasion or whatever it is that the government doesn't want. Violence, certain kinds of violence, improvised explosive devices. The government wants some people to be able to do these things, but only, let's think of them as licensed individuals. And that concept really interested me a lot. So I used to read a lot of books on these topics, collect a lot of books. And then I wound up spending 3 years in a covert position at the CIA and got trained in spycraft, let's just call it at a high level. Surveillance, counter surveillance, dead drops, all the other kinds of things that are known as tradecraft in John le Carre's books and elsewhere. And I was interested in Japan. I was into martial arts. My wife and I moved to Tokyo at one point. And I was training in judo at the Kodokan and going to these great jazz clubs and whiskey bars and coffee houses and all this kind of stuff. And just absolutely intoxicated with Tokyo and the experience of living there and doing judo and all this stuff.
I bet.
It was great. And one day on my way to work, an image came to me uh, i- of two men following another man down the street in a part of the city called Shibuya, Dogenzaka. And it was a vivid image. It stayed with me, and I started asking myself questions about it, such as, who are these two men? Why are they following this other man? And then answers started coming to me. They're assassins. They're going to kill him. And it felt like a story, and I like to write stories. But the answers only led to other questions like, okay, well, why are they trying? I mean, what did he do? And who hired them and why? These sorts of questions. How did they become assassins? How does anyone become an assassin? Doesn't seem like an easy career path. When I look back, I realized a few things were going on that had I realized them at the time, I probably would have made faster progress. One is what my imagination wound up serving up was based on all the stuff I was feeding into it, stuff that just naturally interested me, all the forbidden knowledge kind of stuff. The martial arts, the training I got at CIA, the fact that I was doing judo in at the Kodokan in Tokyo and going to these jazz clubs, because my guy became a half Japanese, half American assassin whose specialty was making it look like natural causes. This is John Rain. He's a judo expert. He really loves jazz. He's got a connoisseur's taste for whiskey and good coffee and the finer things. All these things that I'd been indulging without without intending that they were going to become part of a book or my career or anything like that. I just did them all and indulged them all because I loved them, and they wound up feeding my imagination in a way such that eventually there was a spark, probably provided by that overwhelming experience of living in Tokyo itself, that led to a story, and the story became the manuscript for my first book, now called A Clean Kill in Tokyo, the first John Rain book. So for anyone who's thinking, oh, maybe where do stories come from? What's my story going to be about? Look, if there's a thing you love, if there are kinds of books you love, if there are experiences you love, indulge those things. That's probably what you want to use as your raw material, which you're going to have to use as your raw material. You might not even have a choice. And then when you come up with, usually it's a what if question, not always, but many times it's a what if question, like Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park. He must have been reading an article that said something of recombinant DNA. You got a Michael Crichton book there? Okay, you got it. So the way
sorry,
you reached back for the bookshelf, I thought you were like, oh yeah, I've got Jurassic Park right here. He was probably reading an article about recombinant DNA or something like that, and it just popped in his head. What if somebody used these techniques with dinosaur DNA? I mean, could we recreate dinosaurs today in the 21st, or this would have been the 20th century?
Right.
And then he probably thought, well, where would you get the dinosaur DNA? And then it's like, well, I read that article about how mosquitoes get preserved in amber, and if a mosquito had just sucked on a dinosaur's blood, it would have the blood in it where it was preserved. Yeah, but there'd be some missing parts. Well, maybe you could take like frog DNA and splice that in. But you know what? Ooh, then maybe something would go wrong. I mean, you're really creating a kind of chimera. Like they'd be dinosaurs, but they'd have some other stuff that's unpredictable. And he's off and running. And if you see what he's doing here, in my imagination anyway, but I'm pretty sure I'm barking up the right tree. Every answer he gets to a question, he then subjects to other questions. So it's like, oh, you could splice it together if you put in frog DNA. Okay, but how would you get frog DNA? Well, you could do this. Okay, but who would do this? You'd need a lot of money. You'd probably need some research. Well, maybe it would be some kind of reclusive scientist who wanted to do it for these reasons. Maybe he's got a God complex. Maybe he wants to do it for his grandchildren. Oh, I like that. He's got a God complex. But what caused that? Like every time you come up with an answer, keep subjecting it to the who, what, where, when, why, and how questions. And that's how you find your way into a story.
While you were talking about that, I just envisioned there being this sort of like labyrinth, like this set of hallways, and your the next part of the story you come up with is the next part of the hallway, but then it's like, okay, there's the turn ahead.
Right,
What's the next dark place that you're going to? And
right.
that leads me, and you already kind of answered it already, but my other question was going to be, you know, aside from just books and films, what are some non-obvious sorts of inspiration from you, historical periodicals, maybe music or science, books or anything like that? Like what's some non-traditional inspirations that you kind of dive into?
Well, for me, it always has started with things that I just am super interested in and passionate about just for themselves, like judo, for example. I mean, you have to be not exactly crazy, but you have to be pretty devoted to just find a reason to go live in Tokyo for a year so that you can train every day at the Kodokan. Um, so it's obvious that I just was really into judo. And then that became part of my books. Same thing with politics, geopolitics, current events, whatever you want to call it.
Uh,
I read a lot about what's going on in the world, and I naturally try to read between the lines. Anything that, if there's a leak, and I'm talking about a real leak by a whistleblower,
mhm.
not government approved leaks, I always assume that what leaked through is probably only part of the story
Right.
because after all, despite this got through despite the government's best efforts. Maybe it's only a part of the truth. So what can we extrapolate? What are the shadows we can see behind that wall, rather than just a little bit of light that leaked through? I'm not sure if that works as a metaphor, but hopefully the idea comes through. And because I read so much about these things, naturally these things become the basis for my stories. There's a book on the shelf behind me, The System. That's my latest,
All right.
and so this is about. It's a little different than most of my books. Most of my books are pretty heavily driven by killing and violence. The plots are driven by that stuff.
All right.
There's some killing and violence. I like to say in The System, you got all the sex and only a fraction of the violence. But this is about a young California woman who quite improbably gets elected to Congress, defeating a corporatist 10-term incumbent. And it's the
Cool.
story of what happens to her ideals when she encounters real power. How do people get affected by power? What happens the more to them, the more power they acquire? What are the rationalizations? What are the dangers, the risks, etc.? And all of this is my fictional version of what I read about and speculate about every day. Like, why are our rulers so shitty? I mean, did they start as the worst people on earth, or did they become the worst people on earth, or is it you start with bad material and then it gets
Right.
worse, combination?
What was that journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting question for me because I mean, it can't be a coincidence. We would have, I'm sure we would have better government with if we, instead of elections, if we just had a lottery. You really couldn't get worse people randomly. You could only get better people on balance. So something's going on. This isn't a coincidence. It's not random. It's not random choice, random chance. It's people who are either self-selecting and or becoming even worse
Right.
the more exposed they are to power, the more power they acquire. And so that's the theme, I guess you could say, of the system. How is power really exercised in America, and what does it do to the people who have it? I mean, we know what it does to the people who don't have it. What does it do to the people who have it? And that's because I read about this stuff all the time. The God's Eye View, book I wrote in 2016. This was right before I started working on this book, right before the Snowden revelations. And I had a sense that the government was spying on the American citizenry much more than we realize, because some stuff was from whistleblowers was coming through. And so again, doing what I try to do, I'm like, if this stuff is getting through, how big is it really? And I
Right.
imagine something reasonably big, not as big as the truth, as revealed by Edward Snowden, but big. And then I adjusted a bit when I realized, oh my God, this is even bigger than I was thinking I could get people to go along with in a fictional setting. But the idea for that book about an NSA whistleblower who comes across a program that's obviously unconstitutional and being used for terribly nefarious ends. Her conscience makes her feel like she needs to do something about this. I mean, she did swear an oath to the Constitution. She takes that seriously. But at the same time, she needs the job. Maybe she's got a special needs son and she's divorced and she has a deadbeat husband. And maybe she's got a father who's got dementia, who's in a nursing home, a lot of expenses. And being a single mother with her small special needs son, you know, she has to be very careful about protecting her income and her health insurance and all this kind of stuff. In the sense, these are dilemmas that any one of us can face. We don't like our job, or we think there might be something vaguely unethical about it, or whatever. But I got to put food on the table, and my family's depending on me, and blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
you get a character dilemma here, and then you start asking yourself the questions. Well, who is this person? I mean, what I already answered some of the questions, but okay, but why doesn't she just blow the whistle? What are the countervailing considerations? Well, there's this and there's that, and there are more subtle things. And then we get a dilemma and we get a crisis and an inciting incident and all these kinds of things. But that was a long answer to your question. And so what I would say is to anyone who's looking for like, how do I just fire up my imagination? I would say the short answer is just do the things you love, whatever those things are. Do you love skiing in the outdoors? Just do that stuff. And if you have any natural storytelling instincts, at some point, you're probably something's gonna pop up in your mind, a scenario, a what if question, a character, a situation. And it's probably going to involve skiing or the great outdoors or whatever, or whatever it is you love. Cooking, I don't know. It'll be like a cooking book, not a cookbook, but maybe a cooking thriller if that's a thing. Or look at some of the pioneers of legal thrillers like Scott Turow and David Baldacci, and
Uh,
there's one more I'm leaving out, and I feel bad. I hate to leave anyone out, but
Baldacci, I know. I've got him up here somewhere.
hmm well, I think Scott Turow probably wrote what's considered to be the first legal thriller with presumed innocent.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
not a coincidence. The guy was a lawyer. I mean, he was living in
Right.
that world. Whether he loved it or hated it, I don't know. But it was what he was doing every day. And that was just these situations, judges and defendants, and the whole criminal justice system is just permeating his life. And one day, I'm guessing, thought popped into his head, what would happen if there were a guy who was accused of a murder, but he really didn't commit it? I mean, everyone says they're innocent,
Right.
but what if this guy really were innocent? Well, what are we talking about here? I don't know. Maybe he was like having an affair and something happened to the woman he was having, she was murdered, but he didn't do it. But all the signs show that,
Right.
now he's off and running. But it's not a coincidence that Scott Turow came up with something that is John Grisham. That's how can I leave at John Grisham. Sorry, Mr. Grisham. Don't worry. I'm sure I'm the only person who's ever blanked on your name for a minute. Uh, it's not a coincidence that all these
Right.
guys were lawyers. I wouldn't say it's required. I think Stephen Crane wrote The Red Badge of Courage, and I'm pretty sure he was never in combat, and yet wrote what's considered one of the seminal depictions of combat. I wouldn't say it's essential. If it comes to you and you can make it real and compelling on the page, then God bless. But if it's your everyday life, and especially if you love it and it fires you up, that's probably where you're going to find your raw material in the world. That would be my guess.
I think a lot of people feel limited by the whole concept of write what you know, but like you just said, writing what you know, it's what excites you, so it's going to be
Yeah.
what you connect and resonate with.
Yeah, it's funny. There are a lot of expressions out there that I think it's not that they don't have any utility, but
The application is
yeah, it's like they're incomplete. And so if you don't know a little bit more about it, it might be something that you can easily misunderstand and then misuse.
Mhm.
Or it just won't give you anything that's what I like to think of as actionable. Like, okay, what do I just had a conversation about a week ago with a friend who said, everybody keeps telling me like show don't tell, but I don't really know what that means. And I'm like, exactly. Like
Yeah,
it's a good general bit of
platitude almost.
advice. It's a good, yeah, almost,
Yeah,
if you don't make it actionable, but it actually does mean something, which I could talk about and come back to it in a minute. But if you don't give people tools that they can actually start using on their own once the lesson's over, you probably haven't given them all that much. So when people say write what you know, I just think like it's a little vague and possibly overbroad.
right.
Maybe the better way to put it is write what blows your hair back.
Mhm.
And if you don't know it, then you can get to know it. In my experience, there are three ways of knowing things that you use in your novels. The first one is direct firsthand experience. I mean, if you actually lived this, if you're writing about the Chicago criminal justice system because you're Scott Turow and you're writing your first book, then you have you yourself are an expert in this area. Like if someone else were trying to learn about this, they would interview you. You're the expert. You don't need to do research. You've lived it.
Right.
That's one kind of knowing, if you want to call it write what you know. And then the next kind is to go to these. If you're writing about a place, go to the place. Walk it yourself, see it with your own eyes, smell the smells, feel the heat and the humidity, hear the sounds, the people, get like just the overall vibe of the place, whatever is essential about it. Experience that on your own if you can. And then there's interviewing actual experts. Like if I were writing a book and I wanted to set it in the Chicago criminal justice system, I don't have any direct experience in that area. I would look to interview a guy like Scott Turow. I mean, he's the actual expert. Then there are intermediate steps you can take. Well, you don't want to just sit down and start interviewing someone and say, like, tell me everything about the Chicago criminal justice system. And your response to that would be like, well, what do you want to know? Well, geez, I don't really know. You're not going to be able to extract usable
Right.
information. And this is where the internet comes in handy. And once again, things get expressed as like partial insights, which can be dangerous because they can be misleading. Like people be like, oh, that's just internet knowledge or something like that. But that's stupid. I don't want to say stupid. That's the wrong way to put it. It's thoughtless.
Yeah.
Saying that's just internet knowledge is saying, well, that's just a hammer or that's just a screwdriver. I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, it's a
Tool.
tool that's
Yeah.
good for certain purposes and not good for others. That's what tools generally are. There's no tool that does everything. Internet knowledge is an extremely useful tool. I would not want to perform surgery on someone based on what I can learn on the internet. But that doesn't mean the internet's a waste.
Right.
I mean, if you're facing surgery, for example, and you think you have an illness or you've been diagnosed with a disease or whatever, get on the internet and you'll start to develop a body of knowledge. This will not make you an expert. It will not make you capable of doing that thing, of performing the surgery or whatever. But internet knowledge is extremely useful, not as an end to itself, but as the basis for further inquiry. So now you're getting an idea of a field. I'll give you a quick real world example for me.
Huh?
I don't, I'm not a gambler, at least not in the ways we think. You know, everybody gambles something. That's like that line from No Country for Old Men, where Shigur says to the gas station attendant, "You've been putting it up your whole life. You just haven't realized it." So there's gambling and there's gambling, but I don't like going to casinos has never been my thing. But in one of my books, there's going to be a target, one of John Rain's targets, a guy named Belghazi, who's a Baccarat player. Why did I choose Baccarat? You know what? I don't really remember, but I think this is what it was. I'm like, all right, the guy's a gambler. He's like a high stakes gambler. It's a little like James Bond, Casino Royale, whatever. But
Last
what
time I've heard the
games?
term baccarat. So
I think that was Baccarat. Was that a
yeah,
Baccarat
yeah,
game? I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
remember. So that's probably where I got the idea. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And by the way, I try not to get too influenced by I don't really read much spy fiction or that kind of fiction anymore because it just starts to influence me, and
I say.
I'm trying to get my ideas and my tone and everything else from real life. So I want to be careful about picking up things that become cliches. Like if you're going to write a police procedural and you're watching television TV shows that about
That's all
cops, and
CSI,
that
basically.
might be dangerous. Yeah. So what I did is I got on the internet and I probably just typed in casino gambling. What are the games people play? I know there's poker and I've heard of baccarat and craps. I don't really know much about this stuff. Started reading about it, and then for some reason I thought, okay, it sounds like the highest stakes games in big casinos tend to be baccarat. I don't even remember this is so many years ago, but it was probably my thinking. And then at some point I'm like, I think it's baccarat. So I bought a book, Baccarat for Dummies, and I read
Oh,
Baccarat for
nice.
Dummies. Am I a world-class Baccarat player now? No, absolutely not. But do I know a lot about Baccarat from reading? Decent amount, yeah. Enough so that I can start talking to actual experts, which is what I then did. And a friend of a friend who the book was set in Macau, partly in Macau, who got me a tour of a casino in Macau, including the High Rollers Baccarat room, where I got to ask these people questions about, so is that guy doing this? Is that guy doing that? And they weren't ignorant questions because I had developed a body of internet knowledge at that point. Got the answers from those people. Now I'm able to write the scene from built on a foundation of internet knowledge that enabled me to ask the right questions with a little luck, the right people, shape the scene further, write the scene, and then I've learned the hard way. One final step, show it to an expert, just that scene. Had one other Baccarat player, a real player, guy who's really into it, friend of a friend. And I said, would you mind, friend put us in touch. I said, would you mind, it's only maybe 3 pages or 5 pages, whatever it was. Just this one scene, I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Guy said, yeah, I'd be happy to. People are usually flattered. I mean, I'm going to him because he's an expert. People
Right.
like to not flaunt their expertise. I want to share it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to do that. So this guy read that scene. He was like, damn, this is really good. I would have thought for sure you're a Baccarat player, except for one thing. I don't even remember what it was specifically. It had something to do with little notes they're taking. And he's like, those notes they're taking are not what you said they were. There's some other thing. And I was like, okay, pro
Oh,
tip. Thank you. That would have given away the game. So that's it. That's my general process. And when people say write what you know, I feel like you don't already have to know it. I mean, if you do know it, then that might be good for you. But if you know it and it bores the shit out of you, I would not advise writing that
right.
thing that you know. It should be something you should know it well enough to explore it and to want to explore it further. I think that's the better advice. And everything I just talked about
And be
is
willing to learn.
how do you do that? What's the approach?
Mhm.
The internet, it's at your fingertips. I used to have to go to libraries.
Those,
Now I don't
remember
have
those
to
days?
anymore. Yeah, exactly. If I wanted to research something, what are you going to do? But now it's all at your fingertips. And there's tons of great information. Here's another thing. Sometimes people just like to be negative about these things. I just encountered some of that recently. It was interesting. It gave someone some
Negativity
good.
on the internet? You don't say.
In life generally, it's
Oh, okay,
interesting.
all right.
There's an improv maxim. I've never done improv, but I really like this. It's as I understand it, in improv, you're never supposed to say no, but you're always supposed to say yes, and no
Mhm.
matter how crazy what someone said is to you
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
much of a non sequitur or whatever. You got to go with yes and. Not, again, not exactly, but it's like instead of interrupting, you're like, all right, we're just going to roll with this.
Where can this go next? Yeah.
Yes. And I find this is a more productive way of approaching life generally. It leads to collaboration, cooperation, 2 + 2 = 5, synergy, whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying there's never a time to argue or push back or whatever. Of course there are.
Right.
But instead of trying to find the flaw or the reason not to,
Hmm.
try to find the benefit. So if we're talking about internet knowledge, a lot of people will be like, I don't know, man. 99. I heard Wikipedia is not reliable. I'm like, I don't know what reliable means. You mean like 100% reliable, like the Oracle of Delphi? That nothing is that. So if that's your standard, then I don't think you could trust anything. Maybe not even
Right.
your own eyes and ears,
Well,
right? I don't know.
even if you've got an old set of Encyclopedia Britannicas from the 1990s, a lot of
Exactly.
stuff is not
Exactly.
actionable anymore.
Of course. Or even at the time, they did a
Yeah.
study at some point where people who like the more traditional, like the Encyclopedia Britannica, were like, well, you can't rely on WikiLeaks; it's crowdsourced, and so they did some kind of study, and it turned out that the Encyclopedia Britannica had even more. You can Google this, by the way. I read this article; it had even more errors than Wikipedia. I actually don't care that much about this stuff. I would just say nothing is perfect. And Wikipedia, certainly on political stuff, Wikipedia has an extreme, what I would call liberal bias. I'm not trying to put down liberals or anyone else. I'm just
Uh,
saying that if you read their articles and if you read widely and you've got some pretty decent dispassionate information at your fingertips, you'll realize that their coverage of certain individuals is wildly skewed. And so you should bear that in mind. There's nothing perfect you want to correct for potential errors. But if you want to learn about the difference between coniferous and deciduous trees, Wikipedia is a pretty reliable source.
right.
And besides which, it's not the only source, nor is AI. It's always a starting point. Familiarize yourself and then go broader and deeper. That's the way to go. Instead of saying like, well, I heard there are errors or oh, most of the internet is crap. Sure, most of it is crap. That's true for, what is that not true for? It's true for
Uh,
everything. Most
yeah. I
most
mean,
most movies you don't want to see, but there are a few that are fantastic. So anyway, that's a little bit of a discouragement. I would just say try to have like, what can I get out of this? What's positive? How do I derive the benefit from this? Being your first question rather than, oh God, how do I avoid any risk or potential cost? So that's what I would say about write what you know. It's not bad advice. It's just incomplete and a little and not very actionable in the overly pithy way it's stated.
And actionable advice. I was an actor for years, and I remember one of my earlier teachers would use the term being present in a
Mm,
scene,
yeah.
and I did not know what in the world she was talking about
It's a
for
great.
years.
What do you do with that?
Yeah. And then finally, when I realized what she meant years later, and I started teaching it to my students, but I was very actionable with, okay, I want you to do this. Tell
Yes.
me how that feels when you're when at the end of the scene. And that would be a whole other conversation. But like you're talking about improv. But yeah, so and that's the thing too with the internet, you can watch videos and
Hmm.
sometimes you can get the same bit of advice from three different people, and it's that third person that you're like, oh, that's what this means.
Yeah, that's right, because it was put in a way that just makes sense to you. And that's the other thing. Like some of the best advice I've ever come across is courtesy of Bruce Lee, who said, I might be paraphrasing, but this is certainly the gist of it. Absorb what is useful, reject what is not useful, make
Mhm.
it uniquely your own.
Yeah.
Lots of people will give you advice. There's a lot of how-to books and videos out there. Many of them are fantastic. At least I have found them so. I
Mhm.
found them extremely useful, and they've made me a better writer. Other books I've read and videos I've watched, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just not really doing it for me for one reason or another. A lot of this is subjective. Find the things that work for you and then do what Bruce Lee said. Absorb what is useful, reject what is not useful, make it uniquely your own. But for anybody who's teaching, my advice is always make it actionable.
Mhm.
Try to, anyway.
Yeah.
What is actionable for you might not be actionable for someone else. It certainly won't be actionable for everybody else. But just walking around and saying things like show, don't tell, be present, write what you
Right.
know.
It's like, okay, how do I do that? Yeah.
If there's not something that a person can do with the information, then the information is functionally useless. Almost by if I can't use it, then it is by definition useless.
Right.
So I don't really know what it would take to be present. It would not be, my instinct on a teacher would be to say, you'll often hear people say be present in a scene as an actor. What
Mhm.
does that mean? What do you need to
How
do
do I
to
do that? Yeah.
be present? Exactly. And since we're talking about this, I'll mention a high level thing that I think this is true for with regard to the acquisition of any skill or any craft. There are
Mhm.
three basic elements to the acquisition of a new skill. These are theories, drills, and practice. Always, these three things are available. You don't need to do all three
Mhm.
to acquire the skill. But if you want to acquire the skill with maximum efficiency, assuming you're not a freak like Beethoven or someone, and I obviously don't mean freak in a bad way. The man,
Right, right, right.
he was a freak.
Prodigy. Yeah.
Statistically, sit down
Yeah.
at a piano, he already understands it. He didn't need to do scales, at least as I understand it. If you're Beethoven, then just disregard everything I'm about to say. But if you're not Beethoven, then this might be useful for you. Theory, drills, and practice. If I had understood the distinction earlier in my career, I would have gotten better faster. It's okay, it's never too late.
Right.
But I was very much a just do guy,
Okay.
practice guy. I want to write. I have this idea for a story I'm going to write. I sometimes compare this process for me to having a knack for writing is to writing a novel is as having a tool, having a knack for tools is to building a house. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And if you don't have any training, but you're good with tools, you got a good instinct for
Mhm.
tools, you're a good handyman or handy person or whatever. And then, I'm going to build a house. You will make a lot of mistakes. You're going to put up walls that aren't sound. They're going to fall down. The pipes are going to, whatever. You put the window in the wrong place. You get the idea. But you'll make all those mistakes. You'll keep rebuilding as you recognize your mistakes. And at the end of an overly long and painful, frustrating process, you will have built a nice house. And the second house will be a lot easier because you'll have been learned from all those mistakes. That was me. If I had read the how-to books and watched the how-to videos and done the drills, I would have improved much faster. So, what are these things? Very briefly, if we're talking about writing, how to is just what it sounds like. It's the books and videos, and I've read some great ones. John Yorke's book on 5-act structure, Into the Woods, highly recommended. Great book.
Okay.
Michael Arndt's video, Endings, the Good, the Bad, and the Insanely Great. Terrific. Anything by Robert McKee, the books, the
Great. Yeah.
seminars, the webinars. Terrific how to stuff. On the other end of the spectrum is the free practice. This is now you're going to write. You're going to write your story. Is it a screenplay? Is it a novel? Is it a short story? Is it a sonnet, poetry? I don't know, whatever it is, but now you're going to write. That's the free practice. Everybody knows what that is. It's the in between that I think gets left out. For some reason, people don't do enough of it, and it's so important. This is the drills. For a writer, drills in music, that's scales. Drills, if you're trying to learn a foreign language, is like controlled. Okay, we've learned a new grammatical point, and
Mhm.
now we're going to test the grammar in a controlled setting with carefully calibrated dialogue. It's narrowly tailored so that you can say, I
Fun.
remember my first Japanese lesson. It's like we're learning forms. Like there's and a verb. Dekimasu means can do. And then ka is the question particle. So it's a very simple drill. One person says, Dekimasu ka? Hi, dekimasu. Can you do it? Yes, I can do it. This is not a real conversation, but
Right.
we're in a quite limited, controlled environment practicing this new concept we have. And then as you get more concepts and you get more familiar through the drills with a concept, you can start using it in more free-flowing settings. Same thing in a martial arts. In martial arts, like judo, what is the theory? The theory is as you enter, you want to off balance your opponent. So, okay, and the theory is like, how do you do that? It's like this. Okay, now we're going to practice our ippon seoinage, and you have a cooperative partner. Maybe he's not resisting at all. Maybe he's resisting a little bit. There's a range of drills. At some point, he's resisting a fair amount, but you're still doing this constrained entry. It's seoinage, seoinage, seoinage each time. And then maybe eventually you throw him. It's all controlled. Maybe he gives you more resistance so the drill becomes more useful. Maybe he tries to move around a little bit and block you from doing your seoinage. But eventually you're able to do it. Now you're doing randori. That's free practice, sparring. And now the guy's really trying to resist, and you're doing lots of different things, and he's trying to do these things to you too. And maybe now you try to work your new seoinage technique. That's free practice. So for writers, we know what the free practices you're going to write. What are the drills? Drills are what I call read like a writer. Go read the thing that's like what you want to write. whatever. It could be a whole book, it could be a screenplay, it could be a scene, it could be a line of dialogue, it could be a setting, it could be, God, that's a great action scene. Why was it so like I was actually sweating when I read that scene. It felt so real, and I was so on the edge of my seat. Well, what made it that way? Something did. It was magic in its effect on you, but there's always a magic trick behind the magic act. And if you read like a writer, if you ask yourself, what is she doing, the author doing in this passage that's making the magic, that's making it work? Over time, you'll be able to spot the techniques. Now, if you're reading the how-to books and watching the how-to videos, et cetera, going to the seminars, whatever, you'll be way ahead of it. You won't have to do this by happenstance. Like you read enough screenplays. That's what Michael Arndt did. I don't think he did a lot of how-to stuff. He just read enough screenplays, so he started to realize the common elements. That's a form of drills. But if you read the how-to books before you read all the screenplays, reading like a writer, you'll spot the magic tricks sooner. And then you'll be more able to use those tricks, that craft, in your own writing.
So I feel like you're one of the few first people I've heard like the obviously the theory and the application, but the idea of drills.
Hmm.
And as soon as you say it, it's like duh, but like because it's applicable to so many different fields. But I don't hear a lot of people in the writing field really talking about that particular concept.
I'm laughing because there's a one of my favorite movies is Rocky, and I like when he's on TV beating up the steak, and the news woman says to him, "Did somebody teach you this?" And he goes, "No, I think I invented it," or something. No, I invented it. Um, I mean, I didn't invent the concept of drills, obviously, but yes, I have not heard someone else. Someone else. I don't remember where I learned this, but read like a writer. I think is really good. It's good advice, and it's a good encapsulation of the advice. But I've never heard someone refer to this process as drills. I got that from having trained, studied judo and Japanese. I took piano lessons when I was a kid. It didn't go anywhere, but at some point
So many drills.
you start to see the commonalities in these, and they all have what are functionally drills, a controlled application of a theory, so that you get the hang of it and you get
Right.
better able to deploy it in free practice.
Well, it's also cool because a little, so I mean, I read, On Writing by Stephen King, and
Yeah,
there's
me too.
other books, and they throw all these concepts at you,
Yeah.
and it's a little overwhelming. It's like, okay, focus on theme and plot and, character development. It's like, but with drills, you could kind of isolate the different aspects of that and explore those individually to kind of, strengthen that muscle.
Yes, which is why I advise people to do the drills. Don't leave it out. And by the way, he didn't, if I'm remember correctly, didn't use the word drills, but I've taken any number of Robert McKee's. I've been to at least two of his seminars and done a bunch of his webinars. I've read
All
all
right.
his books. I think he's great. But some people don't like him, and that's fine. If the way he teaches doesn't work for you, find someone who
Mhm.
does. Anyway, I think McKee is great. And the first time I took his screenwriting seminar, story, at the end of the 3 day series of lectures, and by the way, this guy lectures for 8 hours a day. He's one of the best, very best speakers I've ever listened to. You'd think, really, I'm going to listen to someone for 8 hours a day for 3 days? It's a joy. He's that good. Um, anyway, at the end of it, he said something like, "Okay, I'm now going to tell you like the most important thing. No, I'm going to tell you the most important thing you can do, most important thing you can take away from this whole thing today, and whatever you've learned, so that you can keep going." And there may be two. There must have been 500 people in the auditorium. He says, "There may be two of you who are going to do this." And I looked around and thought, "Who's the other one?" Anyway, this is this, the drills. He didn't call it that, but he said this was the screenwriting context. So he said, find the movie that's like what you want to write, whatever it is, a romantic comedy or a western or a thriller. I don't care. It does cops and robbers, whatever it is, and family drama, etc. And what do you love that's like what you want to do? What really, God, like Ordinary People. My God, what a wonderful adaptation that was. I want to write a story that's like that, about a broken family and how the family heals, or something like that, or how the family resolves whatever it's going through. Okay, so get a hold of the screenplay. and watch the movie. And by the way, this is much easier to do these days than it was, say, a generation ago. Now you can find lots and lots of screenplays for free on the internet. And some you can pay for. It's not very expensive, but there are plenty you can get for free. And the movies are often available as part of a subscription service. You don't even need a DVD. It's even better without a DVD. You can just track so quickly with what you're looking for. You can go
Right.
back
Yeah,
10
back and
seconds
forth.
with all
Yeah.
that. It's great. These are really good tools. In many ways, I hate technology, and in many ways, I hate the internet, but that doesn't mean there's nothing good about these things. Anyway, so if you want to write a story like Ordinary People, I don't know why these examples pop into my mind. I haven't seen Ordinary People in a long time, although Robert McKee did use it in his course, so maybe that's why.
Okay. Okay.
Um, Read the screenplay, watch the movie, go back and forth, and then start asking yourself questions like, why is this so powerful? How is it opened? What is it I'm trying to learn about? Do I want to write great dialogue? Then read great dialogue and watch movies with great dialogue. And I should say, if you want to accelerate the benefit of the drills, start with the theory. Read Robert McKee's book. It's called Dialogue. You can't miss it. Or whatever. There's lots of videos on dialogue on the internet. In fact, McKee's got a great one. It's about an 11 or 12-minute YouTube video where he analyzes the text and subtext in a scene from the movie Casablanca.
Okay.
So the instruction is just world class.
I'll check that out.
He's talking about text and subtext. And if you want to write good dialogue, those are two concepts you have to at least have an intuitive feel for, if not a
Right.
conscious grasp of. There's no dialogue, no good dialogue that doesn't have text and subtext. And the wider the gap between the text and the subtext, the better the dialogue. What is it? Text is what's said, subtext is what's meant and what can be inferred. And the bigger the gap, the more engaging and crackling the dialogue. So anyway, read a book or watch McKee's video where he analyzes this one scene in the dialogue in this one scene in Casablanca. And now you're like, oh, I'm starting to get it. I get it. Text and subtext. I understand it. I can talk about it. I know what the concept is. It's like, okay, now let's watch some movies where, like, what movie do you love? Where do you love the dialogue? Quentin Tarantino writes great dialogue. I'm like, great. What's your favorite? Oh my God, the dialogue in the opening to Inglourious Bastards. I mean, that scene went on for almost 20 minutes. That's like 5 times the length of a long scene. How
Yeah.
did he sustain that with nothing but dialogue? Well, that must have been some pretty great dialogue. Some other things going on too, but
Right.
analyze the dialogue. I mean, I have to go to the masters. If you're writing a novel and you want to write great dialogue, you could certainly do more. You could do worse than Elmore Leonard. So he was known as the master of dialogue. Read Elmore Leonard's dialogue, and now you know what text is and subtext. So the drill would be, this is great dialogue. I know it. What's the text and what's the subtext? You could do the same thing with settings. What is making the setting come to life? Why is this love scene so steamy? What is it about it? I mean, I can tell you all these, I can give you the theory on all these things and it's useful.
Right.
But if you don't do the drills, it won't start going into your brain the way it needs to so that you can start doing it in live practice. And live practice, if you're a writer, is your writing.
There's this great show, fun show called Lucifer. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I've never seen it, but I know of it.
My
Yeah.
wife was really into it. I would catch certain episodes. But it's really good for writers to watch. It's
Mm,
a little on the nose with how it does it. But
mm,
so Lucifer is seeing a therapist
mm.
throughout the series.
It's great.
And then he goes off and has these adventures because he decided he wanted to team up with this cop and do like a buddy cop thing. So
Right.
he'll talk about something with the therapist, and then the thing he's wrestling with internally is directly reflected in the case that they're working on. And they kind of spell it out there. So
Mm,
I would say in my own writing, I would try to be a little more subtle about it, but they're very
right.
like open about it. Like, yeah, the internal conflict is mirrored by the external conflict. Here it is. And it's
Right.
just very easy to watch and study it on, in that show.
Interesting. I didn't know anything about the show. That sounds clever. Um, for all these things, what I would say, I'm glad we went into this a little bit because it just gives people more actionable tools, I think. If everything we're talking about is subject to this general rubric of theory, drills, and practice, and just as one concrete example of what we're talking about, people struggle with character development a lot, which makes a certain amount of sense because you're trying to create a fake, a non-existent, fully dimensional, compelling human being,
Yeah.
and that's not easy.
Mm.
So how do you do that? And there are a lot of tricks, I guess you could call them techniques. It doesn't really matter, but a lot of approaches that I've come across over the years. And let's talk about just, we could talk about all of them, but let's, as many as I can remember anyway, but let's talk about just one. This is one I learned from John Yorke from his book, Into the Woods, which is a book about structure, particularly five-act structure, but it covers a lot more. And one of the things that really lit me up when I read the book was this concept. When we're talking about great characters, uh, there are two aspects to the character, at least two aspects. One is what the character thinks she wants, and what is what she really needs.
Mm.
Think of your characters that way. There's so many other ways into your characters, so many other things we could talk about, but let's just talk about this one. What does your character think she wants? What does she really need? Those are not, in all likelihood, the same thing. And there are lots of other character techniques that relate to this point. One I learned from McKee, who learned it from Matthew Weiner, the guy who wrote Mad Men.
Oh, okay.
Matthew Weiner had what he had his people in his writer's room do for major characters is 4 levels of character analysis. For this character, what is the public self, the private self, the secret self, and the hidden self? And what that means, generally speaking, is your public self is the way the public knows you, people in the workplace, casual acquaintances, church, your
Right.
bingo club, I don't know. The public. Private self is how your family knows you, maybe your intimate friends,
Mm.
close people. Secret self is what even your private people don't know about you, what only you know and no one else in your life knows. And your hidden self are the parts of you that even you can't or won't face.
Oh, getting very Jungian there.
Yes, that's right. So some of this is about, I don't know if it's Jungian or Freudian or whatever, but we're talking about the unconscious.
Right.
I think McKee also calls it the difference, distinguishes between motivation and drive. Motivation is what the character consciously wants. Drive is what's really got its hand on the steering wheel, the psychological forces at work within this character. So these are all good things. These are all good ways to try to understand your character. I've heard some people say, like, well, what does your character have in his closet or on his bookshelf, or what music does he listen to? And I don't think these things are irrelevant, but I think they're really skirting the edges. That's to me going to be at best an indirect way to start understanding the key, which is those 4 levels of personality and what does the character think he wants, but what does he really need? Okay, let's just go with the wants and needs thing.
Hmm.
Now that you know, this is a powerful technique. And look, if you think I'm wrong about this and don't bother practicing with this technique, practice with something else. But I'm not wrong about this. I'm not. It's just axiomatic. It's like
Right.
if someone says, no, you're wrong, there shouldn't be obstacles in a story. I would just say, okay, if you think that, it's all right.
I,
Why would I
I don't know what
argue?
the story would be about at that point, but yeah.
It's so this is high level stuff. Like this is just,
Right.
by the way, and because on the internet you deal with a lot of no but rather than yes and. Like people will
Right.
say like not all characters have arcs, Barry, or not all characters have wants and needs, and I would say yeah, that's true, but I didn't say that all of them do, did I? Some don't. In action movies, there's not a lot of gap between want and need. Typically, there might be,
Yeah.
but not usually. But then there are exceptions. The Abyss has Let's use the abyss as a quick example because this is exactly what I'm talking about doing. Oh, now you know like the difference between want and need.
Hmm.
For anyone who doesn't know, the abyss is
Like
it's an
90s.
undersea action adventure story written by
Yeah.
and directed by James Cameron 30 years ago. So it's a great movie. I don't think, no disrespect, because I really have such admiration for James Cameron as particularly as a writer because that's what I do. He's also a great director, but that's not an area I really know that much about, even though I can appreciate it when it's done as well as he does. I don't think he really stuck the landing in the abyss. No disrespect. I still the movie was so phenomenal that even the slightly off kilter ending was more than worth the ride. Anyway, it's an undersea action adventure, but what it's really about is a broken relationship between a husband and a wife who have to rediscover their love and devotion to each other through shared danger. And so let's talk about what do the characters want? What do they think they want? What do they really need? What they think they want is a divorce. What they think they want is to get clear of each other because they think they can't stand each other. But what they really need is to rediscover their love and devotion to each other. And so, in the course of the story, in the course of trying to get what they think they want, they might or might not get what they really need. This is a template that you'll see again and again in terrific movies and books with terrific characters. And now that you know the principle, the theory,
Mhm.
I should be thinking in terms, I should get to know my character in terms of what she thinks she wants and what she really needs. Okay. If you accept that that's an important principle, and you don't have to, it's all good. This is a free podcast either way. So, but if you think it's a useful principle, now don't, you can start applying this principle in your own work right away. And if that works for you, do it. But what I would recommend, sometimes you're too close to your own work and your emotional attachment to it, and the fact that you can't see it because it's this close to your face.
Hmm.
That takes a little higher level skill to be able to really bring this kind of dispassionate analysis to your own writing. Takes a
Yeah.
little practice. And the way to acquire that practice, that skill, do it with things that you have a little bit more critical distance on. So, you know, the thing about want and need, take a book or a movie or a television show that's like what you're trying to do, and see if you can take a great character, Tony Soprano or Walter White or Nurse Jackie or I don't know what. See if this works. See if you can identify. You might surprise yourself now that you know the theory. I'll be like, son of a bitch, I can see this all the time. Here, I'll give you one more example
All right.
of a thing. This is an even easier one. I learned this one from Michael Arndt, the guy who wrote Little Miss Sunshine and a bunch of Pixar movies that I
Love that
haven't
movie.
seen, but that are supposed to be great. Terrific writer. And he's got, I mentioned his video, Endings, the good, the bad, and the insanely great. And he has another video that's also excellent, but not like the the video on Endings was one of the best things I've
I'm gonna
ever,
check that
one
out.
of the best pieces. Oh, it's just, and again, different things, different people. It might not affect you the same way it did me, but it was just gold. I've watched it so many times. I've taken notes. There's so much insight in that video. He's got another one, much, it's about an hour and a half. He compares external, internal, and philosophical stakes in Star Wars, The Graduate, and Little Miss Sunshine, and it is genius. And he covers a lot of
Kind of
other
fun to connect
stuff.
those three movies.
This is what's so beautiful about it. When a principle is sound, you will see it expressed in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
Not just disparate movies, but movies, novels, television shows, storytelling generally. At a high level, if the principle is sound, you'll see it expressed in different places. Kind of like what we were talking about, theory, drills, and practice is true for you want to learn a musical instrument, you want to learn a foreign language, a martial art, you want to learn to be a writer, do you want to learn how to build a house? Whatever it is, a sculpture, name it. It's going to be theory, drills, and practice. You don't have to do all three, but if you want to learn as fast as possible, you will have to do a combination of all three. Again, unless you're Beethoven, in which case you
Yeah.
wouldn't be watching this video anyway.
Yeah. You already know.
So here's what I learned from Michael Arndt in his much shorter video. It's only 8-10 minutes, called Beginnings. I don't remember the rest of the title, but I haven't watched it as many times because it's good. It's got one thing in particular that I thought was just phenomenal in it. So obvious when it's pointed out to you that you feel like, why didn't I realize that? And what some people will say is, well, duh, that's obvious. And my response to that is, well, if it's so obvious, why didn't you come up with it? I've got a friend, a self-defense instructor named Tony Blauer. He calls this uncommon sense because Tony's come up with some, I think, with regard to self-defense, a lot of remarkable insights over the years. And a lot of time, yeah, sure, they're so insightful that when he points them out, some people will be like, well, duh, that's so obvious. And Tony's response is like, so obvious, why didn't you come up with it?
Right.
He calls that uncommon sense. I really like that.
I
Anyway,
like that.
Michael Arndt's uncommon sense. Every story begins with two things, and all of us already know what those two things are. Once upon a time, and then one day.
Huh.
That's it. Every story. And you want to get good at articulating those things.
Setting
So
an exciting incident. Yeah.
that's right. Once upon a time is your ordinary world. So you put it in screenwriting terms, it's your ordinary world. And and then one day is the inciting incident.
Then
And
the
that's
thing
it.
happens. Yeah.
But it's helpful to know
Yeah.
these things because otherwise people try, like, I don't know how to start my story and they flounder because they don't have the tools. They don't have an approach. So now you have an approach. You're trying to think of a story. Well, what's the once upon the time?
Hmm.
And just tell me. And then say, and then what happened? Like, and then one day, what's the thing that happened? The inciting incident is the thing that throws the ordinary world out of kilter and forces the hero, the protagonist, to take some sort of action, a journey, whatever, to try to solve the problem, resolve the dilemma, to right the world again, whatever it is. There's an ordinary world, and then a thing happens that requires, that demands, that causes action.
Right.
That's the and then one day. It sounds simple. Maybe it is. I mean, if you're already doing this, then congratulations. I had to learn it from a video, at least to make myself conscious of it. And
Right.
it's useful to be conscious of these things. Here's another thing. Some of the negativity I sometimes encounter on these things. It's very strange. I just sometimes wonder where it comes from. Sometimes people will say, like, well, you can't teach art. I've heard that. many times. And yeah, no. And that's another thing. Here, I classify that statement as true but misleading. You cannot teach someone to be an artist, but you can teach someone to be a craftsman.
Yeah.
And McKee points this out all the time. All art is built on craft. I cannot teach you to be an artist because what you are as an artist is that's your soul.
Right.
That's some unique thing about you that you have to find a way to express. But how you express it, that's all going to be craft. The greatest artists in history built their art on craft. I'm not a painter, and so I can't analyze the Sistine Chapel and what Michelangelo did on the ceiling there. I couldn't tell you why it is a masterpiece. But I guarantee you that a painter could say, well, yes, it is the finest example of whatever, but on a craft level, he's doing this or that. This is true for music too, which I don't know much about. I could read Shakespeare and tell you the craft that's in it. There's craft. It's not like it's magic. It is magic, but all magic is built on magic tricks. So, and only when you've mastered or whatever is, you never really master it, but it's only when you've gotten the greater the grasp you acquire of the magic tricks, the more you'll be able to use those tricks in the service of your actual magic. That's your art, and no one
Right.
else can do your art but you. But craft is universal. It can be taught. It
Yeah.
can and should be taught and learned. So when people say, well, you can't teach art, to me, it's just a stupid, it's stupid again, thoughtless cop out.
Right.
I try to be accurate in my criticisms. I'm like, it doesn't mean that so you just haven't thought this through properly.
It's like you
You
can
know?
teach somebody scales all day long, but that's not going to make like an Eddie Van Halen or a Joe Satriani. Like
That's
something,
right.
they had to lean into what they did and what they loved. And
Absolutely. But any artist, whether it's Eddie Van Halen or Beethoven or no matter, you have to have talent or you just can't be an artist if you don't have
right.
talent. I cannot be an opera singer. I can't. I
Yeah.
don't have talent for that. To just use
Right.
one outsized example, I can
Yeah.
never, somebody could probably teach me to sing a little less worse or something like that, like in the shower, karaoke, that kind of thing.
Right.
If you have any talent at all, like if you're not tone deaf, you can improve, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to be what we might
Right.
think of as an artist. So you have to have talent. But if you're using that talent and you're creating art, that art will be based on craft. You may have a good intuitive understanding of the craft. I did when I started out. I had a pretty solid knack or talent for writing. I was something I was born with. I was born without a lot of things, but that's not really what matters, not what we're talking about. But I was born with that particular talent. So, so I was able to produce a good amount of art with just an intuitive understanding of craft. But you look at my first book, my very first book, where I couldn't have articulated any of what I'm able to articulate today. And if you know craft, you'll be like, yeah, you know why this is working? Because craft, 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 craft. And you wouldn't be wrong. So this is why it's so important to learn the craft. Again, if you're Steven Spielberg and you just picked up a camera when you were 8 years old and you directed a fantastic short film because you just get it, then that's fantastic. That's freakish luck. You do you. But if you're like everyone else, you're going to have to learn the craft and you can become a better artist faster by learning the craft. So take that thing, whatever it is you want. But a good example is Once Upon a Time and Then One Day. See if you can start consciously using this as craft. Pick your favorite novel, pick your favorite movie, and see if you can do it. Once upon a time, I said I love Rocky. Once upon a time, there was a palooka boxer living in Philadelphia, and no one respected him, and least of all, he had no respect for himself, or most of all, however you would say that. He had no respect for himself either. And then one day, he was offered a shot at the title. That's not a bad pitch, actually, and it's pretty good in capsule. Once upon a time, there was a sheriff who'd left his big job in Chicago or whatever because it was too dangerous and he was burning out to take a job at a quiet seaside community called Amityville, or Amity, as in the story. And then one day, a giant man-eating shark showed up and started eating people, and it was going to destroy the town.
Right.
That's it, pretty much. You
Yeah.
know, name it.
That's interesting. That's another theme that pops up over and over again is the character starts going in one direction, going after what they wanted, but then, does a hard turn to get what they need, which
So
they,
that one is critical. I mean, it's funny. I think like if you want to just get used to the concept of drills, baby steps would be once upon a time and then one day. Because we grew up with that. That's how
yeah,
stories were
yeah,
told.
yeah.
We have an intuitive. I think our brains are wired for story and once upon a time and then one day. It just makes intuitive sense to us, and we've had experience with it because that's how stories, fairy tales, whatever, were told to us when we were children. So start with that. Now I am starting to get the hang of drills. I'm like, okay, you want another one? Probably more, even more useful one in the long run. It's what you were just saying. It's okay. What is this? What's a great story I love? What does the character think he wants? What does he really need? Lonesome Dove, epic novel, phenomenal
I need to
miniseries
read that one.
adaptation. Oh
I
my
remember the show.
God.
I remember the show.
Oh my God, what a book. And I don't, okay, no spoilers, but it is, you can think of it on one level as a kind of bromance, which
Mhm.
is, I mean, it's just unfair to call it that because it's one of the best stories ever
I mean, you can
written.
call Lord of the Rings a bromance. If
Yeah,
you.
so it's funny how you can do that kind of thing, but it's so epic and there's so much going on that to reduce it to that is sort of. But it can also be instructive to do that anyway. But it's about two characters, Woodrow F. Call and Augustus McCrae, played respectively by Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall in the miniseries version. And so it's about these two characters, but I would argue it's really most fundamentally about one of these characters, the one who has the most room, the most potential and need for growth. And that character is after something he wants, and in the course of what he is trying to get what he wants, he might or might not be able to get what he needs. You can analyze Lonesome Dove in those terms. You can also analyze it in Once Upon a Time and Then One Day and every other way because it's a great story. All the craft stuff is going to be in there. Do this thing with characters. God, I love that movie. I love that character. Okay. What did the character Rocky? What did Rocky think he needed? He thought he needed to win the fight until the night before the fight in that crisis of the soul, dark night of the,
Dark Knight of the
almost
Soul. Yeah.
literally a dark night of the soul. He realizes and he articulates to Adrian, I can't beat him. I can't beat him. He's too good. I can't win. So the thing he thought he wanted, he can't get. But then this is when he realizes, you don't have to do this in dialogue. There are 100 ways to do it or innumerable ways to do it.
Right.
But in Rocky, it's expressed in dialogue. When he says to Age, she's like, "What are we going to do?" And he says, "No one's ever gone the distance with Creed before. If I can just, at the end of that fight, if I'm still standing, then I'll know. You see, I weren't no just another bum from the neighborhood."
Which is
And
wild because they repeat that theme in Creed, and I hadn't realized it
I
until.
really liked Creed, but I don't remember it.
So
I mean, I
there,
don't remember that line.
it's the fight he's got at the end of the first movie, and like he's getting wailed on, and
Yeah,
Rocky kind of, I think Rocky wants to stop the fight, but he's like,
yeah,
why are you doing this to yourself? Why? Because I mean, Creed had everything,
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
movie, but he
yeah,
decides to get into boxing, and even Rocky's like, why are you boxing? Like,
yeah,
don't box, go do anything else.
yeah, yeah.
And so he said,
He wants to know if does he deserve the name Creed? I remember that. Like,
if he, well, what he says, and I think deserves the name Creed. What he says though, because he's like, I need to prove something, and Rocky's like, you don't need to prove anything. He's like, I
mm,
do. He's like, prove what? And he says that I wasn't a mistake
that's right.
because he was lost in the system. His family didn't even know about him for like the first 10, 11 years. And so he's brought in to the Creed
Yeah,
family, but he
yeah,
was,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, he was an outlier, and so it was about his earning his place, his
yeah,
right to be alive, and that's, man, I get choked up even thinking about that scene.
yeah,
Such a, because when he starts boxing, you think it's like, I want to prove that I'm the toughest, that I deserve the name Creed, and then
yeah.
when he has that vulnerable moment toward
Perfect.
the movie. Yeah,
He realizes it's about something else.
yeah,
It's not what he wants. And by the way, sometimes a character will get what she wants, but not what she needs. Sometimes she'll get neither what she wants nor what she needs. Sometimes she'll get one and not the other. Probably the most common rubric is you don't get what you thought you wanted, but you do get what you need, like the
yeah.
Rolling Stone song says. So yeah, that's a great example. And again, like it's interesting too that they're bringing it out in dialogue there. There are lots of ways to do it. Dialogue is only one. You have to be careful with that because it could come across as a little on the nose. But if you do it at the end of a journey, at the end of a lot of hardships,
Hmm.
I mean, it's funny, like there were flaws in the writing, but I remember really enjoying the movie An Officer and a Gentleman back in the day. But there's a scene where when Lou Gossett Jr. breaks down Richard Gere's character to a point where he's trying to get him to quit And Richard Gere, he won't quit. He's like, you can, I forget what they call it, like throw me out. There's a Navy term for it. You can throw me out, but I'm not going to quit. And then Lou Gossett Jr. basically tortures him all weekend while everyone else is on leave. And Lou Gossett Jr. says, like when Richard Gere's just exhausted and beaten, but he's still not giving up. And Lou Gossett Jr. says, well, then forget it. You're out. Like he's going to fire him or just throw him out. And Richard Gere, like in that famous thing that not Austin Powers, that Mike Myers parodied in one of the Wayne's World movies. He sits up in the mud and he's just all beaten and exhausted. And he goes, "Don't you do it! Don't you? I got nowhere else to go." And then he realizes, like he didn't even realize that those words were going to come out. But that's what's really driving him. Like, why do you want to be in the Navy? And that was the conversation. Lou Gossett Jr. is like, why do you want to fly jet? Why do you want to be in the Navy? I want to fly jets. Bullshit. My grandmother wants to fly jets. Like he's like, bullshit. That's not what you want. And Richard Gere doesn't really know what he wants or what he really needs. Like what's really driving him. Not so much what's motivating him, what's driving him, what's inside the trauma, the ghost, the demon, whatever. And it's only in that moment of utter despair and terror that the words just come out. Like, I got nowhere else to go. That's it. He's got no purpose. He's got no place.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't have this, he's really got nothing. It's his last chance. So yeah, another instance where it's done with dialogue, but not just two characters sitting around a table and one of them saying, "This is my real drive, and this is what I'm really after."
What was that?
Would be the wrong way to do
What
it.
was that movie? My Dinner with Andre.
I never saw it, but it's supposed to be great. And like, you can do dot. It's a
It's
great
fun,
movie,
but
and it's
hmm.
so they're all different kinds of movies, and some are going to be like you better have really advanced skills if you can carry a movie that's nothing but dialogue and make it riveting. Look, we talked about it in Glorious Bastards. Quentin Tarantino did that opening scene in Inglourious Bastards. If it's not 20 minutes, it's 19 or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's really long
It is
for
an
an opening scene.
extraordinarily long scene.
Oh yeah,
What
how
Quentin
many layers
Tarantino
of sub, or
proved,
not layers, but like a lot of subtext too.
a lot of tremendous
Besides,
amount of subtext, increasing tension all the way throughout. Tarantino talked about this. He's like, I think of a scene that has tension. It's like an elastic band, a rubber band. You stretch it. Is it going to break? 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 The farther you stretch it, and he thinks of it. His writing as his job is to stretch that rubber band as far as it can go before you let it break. So there's a lot of technique, a lot of craft in that magical scene. Of course there is. There has to be. Whether Quentin Tarantino is consciously aware of it, I suspect he is actually, because I read his book, Cinema Speculation, and he's really his insights into storytelling are wonderful. But anyway, but even if he's not aware of the craft, that doesn't mean there's no craft there. He's just doing it organically and intuitively, whatever. But anyway, what I was going to say about that scene is what he proved, if you think any proof is required, is that you can make a scene in a movie go on for 20 minutes, nothing but dialogue. It's just two people, basically just two people talking. And you can make that scene absolutely riveting. You won't realize it was 20 minutes. You'll think it was two.
yeah,
You're on the edge of your seat. It's unbelievable. So it can be done. I wouldn't recommend, hey, in your first screenplay, go write a 20-minute scene. It's advanced. It's like you're
yeah,
learning gymnastics. Don't try to do a Nadia Comaneci on your first run.
right, right.
You're gonna
Get the
have to
basics
build
down
up to
first.
this. Yeah, I'd say so. So, but if your skill is skillful enough, then at some point you might be able to do this stuff. It's funny. I took ages ago a seminar with the Gracie brothers. This is before the UFC. These are the jiu-jitsu guys from Brazil.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No one had ever heard of them. I feel very fortunate. I took two seminars with them in 1991 and 1992. So again, before their
Oh,
fame and
before
fortune at the
they won
UFC.
the UFC tournament.
Saw a
Oh wow.
brochure, one in Philadelphia and one in New York. So this is a true story. I mean, I'm not really bragging. It's not like, they're friends or something. I just feel very fortunate to have come across those brochures. Yeah, the one in New York was a 2-day seminar. Horian, Hickson, and Hoyler were the instructors. And then the one in
Okay.
Philadelphia was Horian and Hoyce.
I keep forgetting how
Anyway,
many Gracie brothers there
yeah,
were.
at this point there are so many. They're great instructors and great guys. But I remember Horian was showing a technique. This is in Philadelphia. How to get out of a headlock, and it's sound technique. They proved it. People in the audience. There was a guy in the audience, very tough guy, former wrestler. Just says tough guy, big guy.
Yeah,
Name was Tom. Good guy. I enjoyed talking to him. But anyway, skilled. He just was looking to pick up some new skills that he must have seen the brochure too. So Horian's like, okay, this is how you get out of a headlock. You do this or that. And people in the audience go, show it on Tom. Show it on Tom. Because then they're like, then I'll believe it. You
right.
know, If it's going to work on a grizzly bear, I'll believe it. So Horian said something that was really thoughtful, insightful guy, and he's able to articulate it. He said, "Yeah, we're going to show it now. Hoist is going to get out of. Tom's going to put him in a headlock, and Hoist is going to get out. He will get out, but what you need to understand is you will not be able to use this technique today to get out of a headlock if Tom is putting the headlock on you. Tom is too big, strong, and skilled for your level of skill. Doesn't mean the technique isn't sound. It means your skill isn't there yet. That's exactly what happened. It was quite the melee, but yeah,
Right.
even Tom was not able to maintain his headlock against Hoist's counter because the counter was sound and Hoist's skill level was as good as it gets.
Right.
So you can write a 20-minute scene like the one Quentin Tarantino uses to introduce Inglorious Bastards, but only if the craft can support it. The craft is sound, but your skill in the craft to do something that difficult has to be exceptional. Don't worry about that today. Baby steps. Just start trying some of these drills that we've talked about. Once upon a time and then one day. What does the character think she wants? What does she really need? What are the four levels of my character? Public, private, or any of these characters. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do it with your own to start
Secret
with.
and
It's good.
hidden were the other two.
Hidden is the unconscious, the thing that even I'm not aware of,
And that's a
which is
fun one to play with.
the most consequential. And it's not easy to see. Like if you think about something like Jaws, my wife, who's also my literary agent, Laura Renner, we talk about this stuff all the time. We're talking about it over coffee this morning. I have no idea why. We just talk craft all the time. And we're talking about Jaws for various reasons. We're talking about story engine. Story engine's another concept I learned from a master class taught by the Duffer Brothers, the guys who
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the Stranger Things guy.
Yep.
Guys, if you know this, there's a company called Masterclass, which I would recommend. I've found at least several of their courses have been excellent, super helpful. James Cameron on storytelling and directing. Oh my God,
The writers
fantastic.
they have on there are phenomenal too.
Yeah, I haven't watched all that. And what I would say is I haven't watched those, so I don't know. But just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you can teach a thing. Those are separate skills. But
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get someone like James Cameron who's obviously a phenomenal writer and director, but damn, the guy's a phenomenal teacher too. Who'd have thunk it? He was great. The Duffer Brothers I thought were great. A bunch of others. Anyway, the Duffer Brothers talked about this thing called Story Engine, and they said, look, in Stranger Things, whenever we got lost, which we did sometimes, we're dealing with disparate groups of people, the children, the teenagers, and the adults. And we'd lose our way in the plot, and we'd always come back to our story engine, which was find the boy, find the boy. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting concept. By the way, what did I do then? Exactly what I'm advising people to do. I'm like, that sounds like a powerful tool or craft, technique, whatever. Let me see if I can apply it to other things, other movies. Jaws, kill the shark. The Great Train Robbery, steal the gold. My own first book, A Clean Kill in Tokyo, save the girl, whatever. You can do this. I like those three-word, very action verbs, important kind of like save or find or
Yeah.
steal or kill.
Or Don
Powerful.
Bluth. Don Bluth, get the child back home or back to
Yeah,
the family.
exactly.
It was
Whatever it is.
like most of his movies.
Do that kind of recognize that's a story engine, like the thing that drives the plot. That's the motivation. If
Right.
you ask if
Like
you
that.
ask Chief Brody in Jaws, what are you trying to do? He would say, kill the shark, duh. And if you ask the people in Stranger Things, what are you trying to do? They would say, find Will, save Will, whatever. They get that. That's the conscious motivation that's going to move the plot of your story forward because these are the actions. People, there's a thing they know they want. They're consciously going after it. They're going to take action to get that thing. It will drive the plot of the story forward. But underneath the surface, there are unconscious drives that provide parameters that are going to shape your character's behavior and choices that your character probably isn't aware of. Those are very powerful forces among humans, and we need to understand them, at least have an intuitive feel for them in characters if those characters are going to be great. So,
Yeah.
you know what? We're almost out of time. So, I should just, to sum up, remember theories. If you remember nothing else from this whole thing, theory, drills, and practice. Read a how-to book or watch a how-to video. If there's a if there's a technique in there that you're like, oh, that's a good technique. I hadn't thought of it that way. Wonderful. Next, do the drills. Now start applying that technique to things that are like the thing you're trying to do. If it's a screenplay or a novel or a scene or some dialogue or a setting
Okay.
or an action scene or a love scene or whatever, apply that new technique to all these different to things that are like what you're trying to do, and then take it for a ride in your own thing and see how it works for you in free
Take the
practice.
test drive. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you so much for being with us this week. Very insightful, and I definitely thank you for giving us your time. Oh, I almost forgot. I don't know if we have enough time for it, but you had won the Barry Award. Yeah, at one point, I was looking through your.
I
Uh,
like to joke that it was named after me, but it
there you
wasn't.
go. Yeah,
I
I was
was
going to ask
just
if
the
your friends
honored
ever heckled you
recipient.
about it. Like, oh yeah, of course you won the Barry Award.
It was an honor, but totally a coincidence.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Thank you, Gideon.